Hello and welcome to another update where I cover the latest updates and developments from the front line across the whole front. Starting out in the northern parts, we see that the Russian offensive continues in the direction of the Kharkiv border, where here we see the main fighting happening to the west towards Pershut-Rafneve and Novosherivka. There's also heavy fighting by Tverdokhilobove, where here the Russian forces seem to have pushed out the Ukrainian forces from this area, and the Ukrainians have retreated towards this defensive line. So it seems that the Ukrainians are retreating from these forward positions and are retreating to this line here, where they will most likely try to hold a stand here in comparison to the scattered places here to the east. So the Russians have managed to push the Ukrainians out of this area, solidifying their foothold across the river line, and they are now preparing to take control over the last village and then push further westwards in the direction of the village of Borova, which is here to the west, which would essentially cut the Ukrainian positions to the east of the Oskil River line in two. Then we move on to the Zaporizhia front, where the Ukrainian offensive continues. There has been two major significant events today. The first one is in the morning around 4 a.m. the Ukraine time. The Ukrainian forces launched an attack here to the northeast of Robotyne, but instead of going in the direction of Robotyne, they moved southeastwards in the direction of Verbove, and likely they have advanced a bit. However, it seems that the Russian forces have been able to withstand this offensive, and there has been heavy fighting here. But according to the latest reports from this area, it seems that the Ukrainian forces actually launched their attack with up to 40 armored vehicles in comparison to the usual 10. So this is 4 times as much, as well as the fact that they launched an airstrike prior to their offensive. So they attacked a Russian defensive position with an airstrike, then they pushed through with 40 armored vehicle. And as such, we see this video here, which indicates somewhere around this part of the front line where the Ukrainian and Russian forces have fought each other. And we see a couple of abandoned Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, as well as a Soviet-era tank, most likely also a Ukrainian, as it is together with the other equipment. And then we see some trenches nearby which are abandoned. So most likely the Ukrainians were able to push through and take control over this area, pushing the Russians out of these trenches and then take control over this territory. But in exchange, they lost these infantry fighting vehicles. Then we move a bit to the northeast by the Vermelsky Rech area. And here the Ukrainian forces restarted attacks in the direction of Staromayorsk. So the Ukrainian forces are again attempting to attack in the direction of this village, trying to gain control over it, which would essentially separate the two sides, as the Russian forces currently hold now a village on both sides of the river line. So these are essentially connected. If the Russians are losing one of them, where either the Ukrainians take control over Urushaine or Staromayorsk, then they would be able to essentially cut off the other one by attacking the supply routes in and out of the village, which would then allow them to take control over both of them. So they're trying to attack from both sides, trying to gain a breakthrough at either of them. But it seems that the Russians are able to hold on so far. But although the Ukrainians are continuously attacking, the Russians are holding their positions. So this is actually something interesting in comparison to prior offensives. The Ukrainians had the Kherson offensive, where the advances were similar to this, where they had a small advance some days, and other days there was essentially nothing happening. For most of the time it was ongoing until the end, where the Russian forces retreated. Then the Ukrainians made major advancements really quickly, but up till that point it were slow advances, similar to what we're seeing now. And in the Kharkiv front, the Ukrainians just managed to take essentially all of it in just a few weeks. So the difference here seems to be that whenever the Russians are actually defending and fighting the Ukrainian forces, they're able to hold on much better. When they just retreated, like they did in Kharkiv and in Kherson, then the Ukrainians are just able to freely take the territory. So the difference here isn't that the Ukrainians are weaker or that the Russians are stronger. It's just that the Russians are actually there fighting. And that is the biggest difference. Then we also have all of the other factors like the Air Force and all of these things. But the important part is the fact that the Russians are standing there and they're fighting and they're holding their positions in comparison to earlier where they would retreat. And this is definitely the result of the partial mobilization the Russians did. Then we move on to the Bakhmut area, where starting out we have continuous fighting by the Klishchiivka area. According to the latest news I have available at the time of recording this video, there is no changes to the front line, which indicates that the Russians are continuously fighting for these positions and not giving them up, not retreating from them, like some sources were saying yesterday, according to some sources that I don't use, but a lot of people were commenting and telling me the Russians had retreated from Klishchiivka, they have retreated from Derivka. It seems so far that that is not the case, and the Russians are continuously fighting for these positions, according to the knowledge I have right now. And then as for the Berivka area, we remember that there was an incursion by the Ukrainian forces where they actually managed to enter the village, and then they were since pushed back. We have this video which was recently released of a Ukrainian advance in the direction of Berivka. This was dated 10th or 11th of July, so 2 weeks ago. And in this, we can see through these night vision goggles that essentially the Ukrainian forces launched a large convoy in the direction of Berivka. They were trying to push through during the night time. And this is something else that they have gained as an advantage since the West started sending tanks and infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine, is that they have these nighttime vision that they didn't have prior at the rates that they currently have. So now the Ukrainians are able to launch these nighttime incursions towards the Russians' positions. And this is what has changed majorly when it comes to Ukrainian attacks. The biggest advantage they have received now is that they are now able to conduct these nighttime operations. But essentially, despite this large convoy, the Ukrainians were eventually pushed back out of the village and across the canal again. Now the fighting has reached further southwards in the direction of Khomove and Yahidne. So the current situation is that we see daily, day by day, the Ukrainian forces continuously try to push through in the southern front as well as by Bakhmut, while the Russian forces have started their offensive here by the Luhansk area as they try to push into the Kharkiv front, as well as go and reach further by attacking the Ukrainian positions here. So there's a lot of movement by the front line on both the north, south and central areas. But again, there's a lot more units being used. The general scale of this war has significantly increased. The amount of casualties being taken by both sides have significantly increased compared to the Battle of Bakhmut, or even further beyond in the early months of this year, as well as the late months of last year. So the scale of the war has significantly increased, and the amount of ammunition, equipment and infantry being used is significantly higher. But this also means that we are now currently seeing a major offensive on both sides that is essentially going to reveal which side has the upper hand, in the sense that both sides are fully committed right now. They are both using everything they have currently available in the war zone to fight this battle, and whatever they have beyond the war zone is not currently committed, which would mean that what is currently committed is going to show which side has the upper hand in the battlefront by the front line right now. And we will see that very soon once the front line breaks in either the north or in the south, to see which side is going to come out on top. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.